Hi guys, welcome back to the Frugal Life with Mercedes. If you are new to my channel, I am Mercedes, and welcome and thanks for joining me. Today I am going to do a video on the difference between being frugal and being cheap. Being frugal is a lot more mainstream now than before. I think especially like with millennials, which I am a millennial, I think that frugality and environmental awareness and all that kind of stuff is a lot more prevalent. And there's other people from different generations that are also frugal. But I think what happened was, especially like in my parents' time, and my grandparents' time, it was really about keeping up with the Joneses. And not that there's not that now, especially with the presence of social media. You might have someone like an Insta model, and she's promoting the latest, greatest, whatever. And so then people see that and they want that status. So there's always going to be the keeping up with the Joneses. There's always going to be people that are on to the bigger, better things. People that don't think there's anything wrong with living paycheck to paycheck or paying for everything with credit cards, etc. But the difference between being frugal and being cheap, the biggest thing is being cheap means spending the least amount of money, versus being frugal is about prioritizing spending. So for myself personally, let's say I go to a restaurant. I will probably order tap water, but I always tip well. Versus if someone is cheap, they will probably order tap water and maybe not tip at all or not tip well. And again, I can't speak to what someone would do, but being frugal means prioritizing. So I talk a lot in my videos about how I have tattoos, and I've spent a lot of money on those tattoos and a lot of time and a lot of effort, and it's something that I genuinely enjoy. So I will not go out to eat for an extended amount of time to save up money for those tattoos. And when I get tattoos, I spend a lot of money and I tip my tattoo artist. So if you guys are getting tattoos or thinking about getting tattoos, remember to tip your artist. Or the piercer or wherever you're going. But then for somebody else, that's not a priority to them. Maybe a priority to you is a really nice vacation. So you will cancel your gym membership, not go out to eat, work extra hours, and you'll prioritize a really nice vacation or a really nice house or a really nice car or whatever it is. So being frugal doesn't mean that you don't have nice quality items. It just means that you prioritize. And there's nothing wrong with being cheap or being frugal. I know that my husband and I have this discussion a lot because I'm frugal, but he's more on the cheap side. And again, that's just a difference of priorities and a difference of opinion. But I think you just have to prioritize what is important to you and what's not important to you. Another thing that's really important to me is my yarn. I talk about that a lot. I have an obscene amount of yarn. However, I only buy yarn. When I buy yarn brand new, like at a craft store, I only buy it if I have a coupon and there's a sale, or if it's on clearance of some sort, or I go to secondhand stores and I buy yarn. So one, when you get it from the secondhand store, it's more environmentally friendly because the product's already been made, and also you're getting things for a discounted rate. I also really encourage people, if being frugal is new to you, start off with maybe going to thrift stores. If you've never shopped at a thrift store, consider it. I've met people that will go to thrift stores, but they'll only buy stuff that's like brand new with tags. And I'm not particular about that. I don't mind wearing stuff that other people have worn. That's how I grew up. I can remember I didn't even know that other people didn't do that. I thought everybody got their clothes at the thrift store and their furniture came from the thrift store and all that. So that's another thing. That's the difference between being frugal and being cheap. Someone that's cheap will maybe go without, like, they don't have any socks because they just don't want to spend the money on socks, versus someone that's frugal will wait until socks are on sale. Or shoes. I buy shoes from the thrift store, but I like to get my tennis shoes from regular shoe stores. But what I like to do is I wait until there's a sale or until I have a coupon. And again, you don't want to be getting stuff just to get stuff, but if you need something and you can wait until it goes on sale, that's a good option too. So a store was actually going out of business near me, and it was a sporting goods store. So I had some money set aside, and I got a ton of my favorite brand of tennis shoes are Brooks, and they're very, very expensive. So I waited. I think Brooks are like $130 a pair, which is a lot. But I stocked up and got quite a few pairs when they were on super sale because the store was going out of business, and I was getting them for $70 a piece. So I bought several pairs. So that's a lot of money up front, but then they're in my closet and I have them for later. So that's another thing about being frugal too, is that you, like I always tell people, like, stock up. Like if you're new to, like, let's say, stockpiling food or, whatever, whether you're a prepper or for just being frugal, if you know that you guys, your favorite pasta sauce goes on sale, it's 75 cents a jar, and when it goes on sale, you have a coupon for it or whatever it is, then buying 10 jars, if you have the money for it, and if you guys will really use it, versus paying $2 a jar when it's not on sale. So that's, this video is a little bit all over the place, but I'm trying to explain to you guys the difference between being frugal and being cheap, and then also like how you can incorporate being frugal into your everyday life if it's still a new thing for you. So because even though it's becoming more mainstream, I think there are still some people that are just like, it's like, I think sometimes they think they're being frugal, but they're not so sure. I read a book a few years ago, and then a few years before that I had read it, and it's called The Penny Pinchers Club, and it's about a lady who's very materialistic, and she has no idea how much money's coming in, how much money's going out. She's just very clueless, which it's a lovely book, and I would suggest it to anybody. It's fiction, but it's really, really good, and I think it really it helps show how most people are. And she joins this club called the Penny Pinchers Club, and they teach her about couponing, and they teach her about eating at home and all sorts of stuff that is really helpful to her. And even though it's a book of fiction, a lot of the stuff in the book is very helpful. So in the book, one of the girls that she meets, like, makes her own bread. And so this lady just goes like hog wild and buys the most expensive bread maker she can find, and the super, super fancy bread flour, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and that's not really necessary. You can make homemade bread without a bread maker. You can, and so I think sometimes, like, when we're thinking about being frugal or becoming frugal, there's the pros and cons between what's really frugal in reality and what's frugal in our head but maybe isn't. So that's why I always suggest to people, like, really think about what you're doing. Like, does it make sense to buy a $200 bread maker if you've never made a loaf of bread in your life? Maybe not. It depends on your situation. But another option would be to get one secondhand, borrow one from a friend, or look up recipes on how to make bread without a bread machine. Those recipes are really great too. Or canning. I said this in another video. I get a lot of questions about me canning, And for me personally, it doesn't make sense to buy a canner and do all this canning when everything that I would make for canning would just be for myself, because my partner doesn't like those kinds of things. And yes, you can pretty much anything, but the things I would can, like he doesn't eat jam, he doesn't eat jelly, he doesn't eat soups, he doesn't eat stews, he doesn't like, canned vegetables. So, again, you have to prioritize and really think about what makes sense in your life. Let's see. Something else like appliances. The difference between being frugal and cheap is I used to clean for a lady. I used to do cleaning on the side. And I used to clean for this lady, and they had a $500,000 house. It was on this like several acres of property and like very bougie. And I cleaned their house, but their vacuum was really janky. And I remember she didn't want me bringing my own vacuum because of other people's germs, and I totally understand that. So she showed me her vacuum. Her vacuum had to have been from like 1979. It was a monster, and it was heavy. And I was like, okay, like a vacuum's a vacuum. But it like wouldn't work. It would decide it didn't want to work. The cord part came apart from the plug. It just was not safe. And I was like, this is not a good situation. So these people had enough money to have a $500,000 house or $1 million house or however much it was on all this property and have super nice furniture and like have a cleaning lady, but they didn't want to buy a vacuum. And I understand, like, if it still works, it doesn't matter how old it is, you want to use it, because that's what I do. But once something becomes unsafe, then that's where the being frugal and being cheap differ. If you're driving a car that's extremely unsafe and you can afford to get a newer car or a safer car or put repairs into that car, see, those are the differences between frugal and cheap, in my opinion. It would have been a good idea for those people to get a new vacuum. And they could have gotten a used vacuum, but I don't think they probably would have. But I remember telling her, like, it might be time for a new vacuum. And she just was like, she just didn't want to get a new vacuum. She was like, no, we don't need to spend the money on a vacuum. So again, those were their priorities. And so a lot of times too, frugal and cheap, the differences are, again, like I said, priorities. For me, at that point, I would have just gotten a new vacuum, because my safety, or the safety of whoever's using the vacuum, trump not spending the couple $100 on a vacuum. But again, that's just my opinion. So those are just some ideas. Sorry, this video is a little bit on the rambly side, but it was something that I kind of had on my mind, because I do get a lot of questions about the differences between frugal and cheap, and how to become frugal and how to get it rolling. So this is just kind of like a little bit of a hodgepodge of ideas. But anyway, so please consider subscribing to my channel, comment, like, check me out on Instagram, The Frugal Life with Mercedes, and until next time, bye.